So terminal tackle, let's go ahead and get started here. I don't care what you're fishing for, what species or what venue, it all starts with your terminal tackle, right? It all starts with your gear, okay? It's not about finding fish or, peak seasons or top baits. That's not what this seminar is about. It's about that terminal tackle. It's about the heart of it all. Terminal tackle, when I think about that, rods and reels are not really considered terminal tackle. Certainly it's important that you choose the right rods and reels, but line, leader material, swivels, hooks, all of the good stuff that you probably have so much of at home and you probably only use 10% of what you have. Am I right? Okay, and that's because you get kind of, I don't want to say roped into buying gear, but sometimes you're just not sure. So you say, well, I'll buy this pack of hooks and this pack of hooks or this line and this line, and you end up with a bunch of stuff that, like I said, you generally don't use. Because what does work, you tend to stick with. Okay, you tend to stick with what works. So, our goal is to kind of shorten that learning curve, to make you more successful anglers, and to talk to you about the fundamentals of terminal tackle. What's important and why is it important? Let's start with what quite possibly is, vital is your line, monofilament line. Fishing line comes in a lot of different varieties nowadays, okay? There's monofilament fishing line, there's fluorocarbon fishing line, there are copolymers, which are a combination of different materials, okay, that produce specialty lines for really specific venues. For example, this is a very supple line, okay, designed for really lightweight 6-pound test. Okay, if you were throwing a very, very small, lightweight bait, for example, you're fishing on a lake or in a canal for peacocks or clown knifefish, and you're throwing very light, baits, maybe live bait or artificials, that may be the way to go. There are some other, lines, for example, leader material that is specifically extra hard. It's really tough and really abrasion resistant. So there's a lot of different variations. There's braided fishing line, okay? Then there's the next generation of fishing line, which is called PE line, which is the next generation of braid. And I want to talk to you again a little bit about all of these different variations and when to use what and why, okay? We'll start with color. Line comes in a lot of different colors, okay? We all know that. But remember, what you see is not what the fish sees, okay? Fish don't see the same way that we see. And water reflects light and colors completely different than air out of water. So what you and I see as clear, a fish may see as black. Okay, believe it or not. And we know this because a lot of the underwater footage that we shoot on our television series, when we go back to the office and we review all of that footage, I'm out there one day on a weed line catching dolphin and I can't get these schoolies to bite no matter what I'm doing. And I come back to the office and I realize that my 30-pound fluorocarbon leader looks like somebody took a black magic marker, okay, on the screen, so to speak. It's black. Fish see that. So again, you need to remember that what those fish see is different than what you and I see. But still, we can take some measures to try and reduce our overall terminal tackle signature, because one key element in fishing in Florida is stealth. These fish are not stupid. They see a lot of pressure. All of us are out there trying to catch these same fish along with a million other anglers. So we, of course, do everything we can do to present our baits, may it be natural or artificial, in as natural a fashion as possible, as stealthy as possible. Monofilament, clearly the most popular fishing line in existence, and it probably will always be because of how affordable it is. It's really pennies, even though it costs, a substantial amount to fill a reel. You're talking about 500 or 600 yards of line. Per foot, it's pennies, or per yard, it's pennies. It's not very expensive. And it's very, very durable, okay? And it can last quite a bit of time. However, a lot of people make the mistake of filling their reel with monofilament and never respooling it. You know, they'll fish that same spool of line that's on their reel for season after season after season. Then they hook a big quality fish and it's zing pow and they lose that fish and they go, well, geez, what happened? Okay, what do you think happened? Your monofilament failed, premature tackle failure. Okay, your monofilament failed. Monofilament is really, really strong, super durable when it's fresh. Okay, when it's a new spool of line and it's fresh. You take that line and you put it in salt water and you leave it in the sun, it's going to deteriorate. Plus, monofilament stretches substantially. Anybody have any idea how far monofilament will stretch? Okay, that's right, 1/3 of its length, like a giant rubber band. So if you take that monofilament as you're fighting a fish and pull it and it contracts and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, what's happening? Heat is building up in that line and ultimately the line will fail. Okay, it will get weak and the line will fail. So it is absolutely imperative that you always fish fresh line. Now that, especially when you're fishing monofilament. Now that doesn't mean that you have to come into chaos, even though they would love for you to bring all of your reels in here every week and have them re-spool them all with fresh line. Absolutely not necessary. However, your top shot, you know, your top 100 yards that's being used the most has to be fresh. Don't be that guy who says, you know what, it's okay. It's okay. I've had this line on my reel for, you know, X amount of years. It's not going to fail now. It's held up until now. Until you go out there and you're trolling for dolphin and you finally get that shot at that 50-pound dolphin that you've been dreaming about your whole life. And the fish jumps and your line breaks, okay, because of something you could have avoided. You know, I always like to say the ocean is a great place. It really is. There are two things that I cannot control out on the water: the weather and the fish, no matter what. Everything else I can control, and I'm gonna control it, okay? And even then, you're not gonna be 100% successful all of the time. But when it comes to something as minimal and as affordable as monofilament, it is absolutely vital that your line is fresh. Again, remember that monofilament stretches. Okay, that's important when you're targeting fish that jump. Okay, because it's like a rubber band. If you're fishing line that has no stretch in it whatsoever and you're targeting sailfish, dolphin, tarpon, or any other fish that jumps, when that fish jumps, if there's no give, what's going to happen? Zing pow, okay? Something is going to fail. You're going to rip the hook out of the fish's mouth. One of your knots is going to fail. Something is going to give. Okay, 9 out of 10 times. So it's really important when you're targeting offshore pelagic fish that jump, or any, you know, fish where you need that stretch, that you're fishing the monofilament line. Okay, really, really important. This is even, you know, when you're trolling for wahoo, high-speed trolling for wahoo. Wahoo do not typically jump, even though they will, you know, certainly not like a sailfish. But when you're pulling these baits at 15, 16, 18 knots through the water, and a 50, 60, 70-pound wahoo comes along and crushes that lure, something has to give. And if your drag is just a little bit too tight, if you don't have the forgiveness of the monofilament, again, something will fail. So the benefits of monofilament are A, the stretch, B, it's very forgiving. So if you're a new angler, a little bit inexperienced, and you want a little bit of leeway, a little bit of cushion, monofilament is the way to go for sure. Now, monofilament comes in a lot of different colors, like we said earlier. Clear, you know, obviously high vis colors, and the latest rage is what's called orange crush. Okay, orange crush. This is what we've typically been fishing as a high vis line. Okay, and when would you fish a high vis line? It's, you know, when you're trolling, when you're kite fishing, when you want to be able to see your line. When we're kite fishing, it's imperative that we can see our lines going up to the kite and back down to the water. When we're trolling and we're fishing sometimes a 12-rod spread, okay, we want to be able to track all of those lines. So all of our trolling rods are loaded in high-vis line, either the high-vis green or chartreuse or this new orange crush. And as a matter of fact, sometimes guys will switch it up and, well, I don't want to say switch it up, I should say mix it up. The guy fishing on one side of the boat, his kite outfits are loaded with this line. The guy fishing on a different side, the back side of the boat, will fish this line. So this way you can clearly tell whose line is whose. But remember, this is very visible, and I don't want the fish to see this, so I'm never gonna tie a high-vis line directly to my hook or directly to my lure. I'm always going to have a clear leader in between my high-vis line and the fish that, and the tackle that I'm using. And we're gonna talk about leader material more in a minute. We're still on the monofilament game. So a lot of different colors. If you're not sure what to spool with, think about how you're going to be using that outfit. If you're going to be trolling or kite fishing, go with a high vis line. If you're going to be bottom fishing, drifting out live baits, and you want to be more on the stealthier side, go with like a smoke gray, a light blue, or a clear monofilament. Okay, you really can't go wrong with clear. So again, the color, is important, but at the end of the day, it's not what the fish see, it's what you see when it comes to that line, okay? Breaking strength. There's a really, I don't want to use the word trick, but breaking strength on line varies tremendously from one manufacturer to the next. Not sure if you guys have noticed that. Anybody notice that? Okay. So one company, brand A, their 30-pound test line may break at 45 pounds. Company B, brand B, their 30-pound test may break at 32 pounds. Why do they do that? Okay, what is the benefit there? Well, company A believes that if this gentleman goes out and fills his reels with their line, brand A, with 30-pound test, and he catches all of these big fish and his line never fails, what kind of line is he going to buy again?
Brand A.
Brand A. So what they do is they rate their line much lower than what the actual breaking strength of the line is. So each manufacturer has a little bit of a different policy. And I've done this, and I assure you if you do it too, you will find the same results. You can take 10 different brands of the same pound test monofilament, put them on a line breaking machine, and test them all, and every single one of them will break at a different level. Okay, at a different level. So you've got to be really careful. Now, the only difference there is when you see IGFA. When you see a label that says IGFA, 20 pound, for example. So there are tournaments that require you to fish this line. It is not up to you what line is on your reel. You have to fish either, in this particular case, it's high catch IGFA. Some tournaments, will turn to suffix line. But an IGFA rated line will guarantee that this 20-pound line will break at 20 pounds. So it's a level playing field across the board for all of the tournament competitors. But as a whole, when the line is not rated IGFA, again, there's a lot of different variables and a lot of variation. One thing that I find when it comes to monofilament is the majority of anglers fish line that's way too heavy. Way too heavy, okay? They're out here fishing for sailfish with 60-pound test, 80-pound test. What are you fishing for? Are you kidding me? Okay, you can catch a 500-pound blue marlin on 60-pound line. Guys are out here targeting daytime swordfish with 40-pound line. Okay, monofilament is incredibly strong and durable when it's fresh. Remember what I mentioned, as long as it's all balanced. You're fishing a balanced rod and reel, your drag is set properly. This is 100-pound test. That means, according to the label, this will break at 100 pounds. I don't care who you are not putting 100 pounds of drag on any fish. It will pull you off the boat. Okay, it literally will pull you off the boat. You're not going to put 100 pounds of drag on any fish. So why are you fishing 100-pound test? Now, of course, there's a balance there because you obviously don't want to go out and fill a Penn International 50 wide, okay, with 20-pound mono because that doesn't make sense. Okay, you don't need that large of a reel for that thin of a line. So again, it's all about balance. But I find that most guys will fish line that is just too heavy, okay? Now, the heavier the line, the more restrictive it is on your bait and on your presentation. Regardless if you're fishing a live bait, that live bait has to struggle much more when that line is heavier than it needs to be. You know, kite fishing as an example is a perfect example. When we kite fish, we're fishing 20-pound tests across the board. On our far baits, we may even fish 16-pound, okay, 16-pound test. Most guys, again, that don't know, will fish 50 or even 80-pound line. Way too heavy. The heavier line catches too much wind, okay? It's too restrictive on your live bait, so scale it back. You're gonna be a more successful angler if you lighten up your tackle across the board and fish lighter line if you're not already doing so. However, the lighter the line, the more important it becomes that it's durable and that it's fresh and free of abrasion. If you feel any nicks or scratches in the line, what's gonna happen? That line is gonna break at that weak point. At some point, it may not break on the next fish, but it will on the following one after that. So I can't stress how important it is that that line be fresh. In addition to monofilament, there's something called fluorocarbon, okay? Fluorocarbon leader material. Fluorocarbon is stiffer than monofilament. It's more abrasion resistant than monofilament, and it's less visible in the water than monofilament. However, you don't need to fill your entire spool with fluorocarbon. It'll cost you an arm and a leg, and you won't have the performance that you're looking for in your tackle because it's so stiff. So we use fluorocarbon just as a leader material. And as I mentioned, it's more expensive. That's why it's sold in little pocket spools, 100-yard pocket spools, rather than 3,000 yards, okay? A lot of people will say to me, is fluorocarbon worth it? I don't know, I'm fishing, you know, if you're fishing a rod and reel that costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars and a boat that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, don't you want to spend an extra couple bucks to lean the odds in your favor? I do. Okay, so certainly we've seen a benefit by fishing fluorocarbon, either clear or light pink. Light pink is just as effective as the clear line. And certainly we feel and have seen a benefit. So I suggest that all of your leader material be fluorocarbon. Diamond presentation fluorocarbon, by the way. In addition to fluorocarbon, as I mentioned, there are times when our leaders, for example, when we're rigging our offshore trolling lures, I really like this extra hard leader material. Like I said, it's a little stiffer, it's a little more abrasion resistant. Why? Why is that important? Sometimes when we're fishing, even for say blackfin tuna or a dolphin with small little feathers and small little chuggers, okay, we'll rig all of our offshore lures with 150-pound extra hard leader material. It's not too heavy, plus elephants eat peanuts, don't they? All right, you can be out there trolling a small little bait, and before you know it, a white marlin or a blue marlin or that 50-pound dolphin that we talked about earlier will crush that bait. So you want to have that little more insurance on your trolling lures. So there's certainly times that we'll lean toward not the monofilament or the fluorocarbon, but an extra hard leader material, okay? Next is braid. Braid, if there was one product that absolutely has revolutionized fishing, it's braided fishing line. This has changed the game completely. Absolutely changed the game. Braided line has allowed us to do things that we could never do in the past. You know, as an example, deep dropping in really ultra deep water with either deep drop rigs, which we'll talk about, or with jigs and lures. Braid is essential. If you go out there on a deep drop reel and load it with monofilament, first of all, it's substantially thicker than the braided fishing line, substantially, like 5 times as thick, if not more. And what does that mean? It's going to catch water, and it's going to be a lot more resistant to the water. So when I'm trying to fish straight up and down in 1,200 feet of water for queen snapper, I'm going to have a giant bow in my line. And I'm not going to have 1,200 feet out. I may have 1,500 or 1,800 feet of line out because of the bow, all of that restriction on the water. Additionally, the stretch Remember we said earlier, monofilament stretches up to 1/3 of its length, which is beneficial when you're targeting fish that jump or on the trolling aspect. However, when I'm bottom fishing or when I'm jigging, I don't want any stretch. Braid has near zero stretch. And understand what braid is. This is not one strand. This is multiple tiny, tiny strands that are braided around each other that result in a very, very thin line. Not all braid is created equal. You have 4 carrier braid, you have 8 carrier braid. That means 4 strands wound around each other, or 8 even smaller strands wrapped around each other. Okay, but that's what braided line is. The benefits of braid are many. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, no stretch. So every time I move that rod when I'm jigging or throwing a soft plastic or any sort of artificial, if I move that rod 1 inch, that bait's moving 1 inch. Okay, whereas with monofilament, the bait's not moving at all. If I'm fishing straight up and down, I'm bottom fishing or deep dropping, I could feel a fish fart on my bait. That's how sensitive it is. Okay, because literally with no stretch, every single move is translated up the braid all the way to the rod. So that no stretch factor is really, really beneficial in a lot of different venues. Additionally, because it's so thin, I can put substantially more line on a smaller reel, which means I can fish a lighter, smaller, more comfortable outfit and target larger fish because I'm fishing braided fishing line. Okay, so again, another huge benefit. However, while braid is incredibly strong, you cannot break this stuff, okay? This is 10 pound, and I bet if I tied it around his waist and my waist, we probably couldn't break it. It probably would, okay? As long as it's not damaged. Again, now here's the thing. Remember what I just said, these are really ultra thin strands that are braided around each other. If those strands, even one of them, gets damaged, which could easily happen from something as simple as leaning a rod up against a concrete seawall at your dock or at the boat ramp, or even taking a lure and, you know, anybody here put their lures on guides? Okay. He's back there going, I do! Okay. You get something free for admitting that, okay? Something as simple as that, believe it or not, that sharp little tip on the hook could scratch that braid and damage it. And what's going to happen then, you're going to have a weak point in your braid, and premature tackle failure is going to enter the equation at some point, I guarantee it. And you will never be able to tell. Unlike monofilament, where you can run your fingers on the line and you can feel the abrasion. Feels like sandpaper, right? It's just not as smooth. With braid, you can't feel that. It's so thin, you can't see it and feel it. So you've got to really be careful with braided fishing line. Never, never do we tie our braid directly to our hook, directly to our lure, directly, you know, to anything that we're fishing. We always fish a leader. We always fish a fluorocarbon leader or top shot in between the braid and whatever it is that we're fishing. Depending on what it is, for example, if we're jigging, okay, vertical jigging, which is extremely popular, we always have a 25 to 30 foot section of fluorocarbon leader material in between the braid and the lure that we're fishing. We're maximizing the best of both worlds. We're packing as much line onto our reel as we possibly can. We're fishing a lighter, more comfortable, more sensitive outfit. We're fishing lighter line, which allows us to get deeper, okay, and penetrate that water column easier, especially when there's a lot of current, something that we face out here all of the time, okay? But by adding the top shot of fluorocarbon, we have the stealth. We're adding that stealth because this is much easier for a fish to see in the water than this is. Okay, so we're adding the stealth, but we're also adding that shock absorbing factor, you know, because again, if you hook a fish on braid and there's no stretch at all, what's going to happen? You jeopardize pulling the hook right out of that fish. So having that little bit of stretch in that line again, is the best of both worlds. How do we connect the two? Lately, I've been using what's called an FG knot with a tremendous amount of success. It's very, very easy to tie after you practice it, and it's super streamlined, very clean, no hardware, reels up and on the reel with no problem through the smallest guides in creation. Again, it's called an FG knot. Make a note, learn how to learn how to tie it, and I'll tell you what, that is the best connection that I have found between braid and fluorocarbon. A lot of guys will use a uni knot. You can use an Albright knot. There's a lot of different sorts of connections, but that FG knot has really proven to be outstanding. Color of braid. Again, a lot of different options. You know, half the time I think these companies create colors not to catch fish, to catch you, right? Because if all of the braid was one color across the board, you'd be like, what do I buy? I don't know, but by introducing orange and red and blue and 19 different shades of green, I don't know, I kind of think it suckers anglers in. But again, there's some benefits that, to each color. Stealth, when you're fishing the backcountry, when you're fishing shallow water, redfish, snook, trout, we like to turn to a tobacco brown or a green color, something that really blends in with the environment, with the backcountry environment. However, when we're offshore, we may fish a blue, okay, or we may fish an orange braided line, okay, because again, it's easier to see those colors against that surface, against the ocean. When you're fishing either live bait, you're deep dropping, and a lot of times we're looking at that line. This is really important when we're, for example, daytime sword fishing. Your line is telling you so much. So it's really important that you could see that line. So match the color of your braid to the venue that you're fishing is not a bad rule of thumb. But remember that you're always going to be including that top shot, or fluorocarbon, or even monofilament, so the fish is not going to see that line. Just like we talked about with the mono, okay? The color is not about what the fish sees, it's about what you see, okay? And helping you be a more successful angler. The next generation of braided line is something called PE line. This is right out of Japan. It is the next generation of braid. It is thinner than braid, smoother than braid, and stronger than braid. It is incredibly thin, and incredibly strong. We're fishing deep water, 500, 600 feet, jigging on the bottom with 20 pound, okay, 20 pound, and even deeper. It used to be where if you wanted to fish deeper water, you would instinctively say, well, I need heavier line, heavier tackle, a heavier weight, or a heavier jig, right? Depending on what you were doing. That's no longer the logic. If I want to fish deeper water, I'm going to go lighter, not heavier. I'm going to go lighter, because the lighter that my line is, the less restriction, again, that it has in the water column, and I can penetrate those deeper waters. But again, it is so crucial that that line is not damaged, especially with PE line. This is an 8 carrier. It's called Jigline 8. It's from Simoneaux. Again, right from Japan. It's tough to get good PE line locally. It is so incredibly thin and strong, but it's very, very fragile. Each little strand, or I should say this one strand, is made up of 8 little strands, like we talked about earlier, 8 carriers, and they are literally about as thick as a hair, not even. 8 of them wrapped around each other to create this one little ultra thin line. And what I'm going to do is kind of just hand this to you and pass it around. I want you to see for yourself how thin and round this PE line is. And because it's round, the benefits that PE line offer are, number 1, less restriction in the water column. Number 2, it's silent. Anybody ever fish braid, and when you hook a fish, you hear that zzz, you hear that line in the guides or the line on the reel. With PE line, you don't hear anything. It's absolutely silent. So you're fighting a fish, and it's kind of a weird sensation, because you're fighting a fish and he's screaming line off your reel, and the guy next to you is going, dude, why are you just standing there? I'm not just standing here, the fish is dumping me, okay? But he doesn't hear it. You literally don't hear anything. So check that out. You'll see how thin that is. It's incredible. That is the next generation of fishing line. But even in that scenario, we again include a fluorocarbon leader on top of that as well. If you are unfamiliar, in a lot of different venues, like we said earlier, where we're fishing braided fishing line and we're connecting it to a monofilament or a fluorocarbon leader, and you're not sure or you're a little skeptical on how to tie these somewhat, I don't want to say complicated knots, because they're not once you master, they're not, no pun intended. Once you master them, they're easy to tie, but they do sell wind-on leaders, okay? And a wind-on leader is a length of fluorocarbon or monofilament, and it already has a loop in it, and all you have to do is create a loop in your braid with either a bimini twist, which there's no stronger knot when it comes to creating a double line than a bimini twist. We've tested them, I promise you. Nothing is as strong as a bimini twist when it comes to doubling up your line. And you simply can connect a wind-on leader with a loop-to-loop connection. They sell them back there right up on the wall. Right on the back of the package is the instructions on how to do it. Okay, so if you're not sure, just follow those instructions, okay? Wire, this is yet another area, where there's a lot of different options. You have multi-strand cable, you have single strand wire, you have titanium. Okay, here in Florida, there are two very popular species that we fish for, which are called Kingfish and Wahoo, that if you are not fishing wire, they will clean your clock 9 out of 10 times. And you will be a very frustrated angler. Anybody ever lose a fish because they got cut off? Whoever's not raising their hand, let's try again. Anybody ever lose a fish because you got cut off? It happens to all of us, okay? It does. You got to be really lucky to catch a good quality fish on mono with no wire leader. Does it happen? Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. You'll catch big kings, you'll catch wahoo, they're hooked in the corner of the mouth. But for the most part, if you're going out and specifically targeting these toothy critters, you've got to have a little bit of insurance. You've got to have some wire. Multi-strand wire, what I call cable, okay, is obviously, again, it's multiple strands of wire that are wrapped around each other to create this multi-strand cable. It's very flexible, pliable, okay? No stretch, obviously, it's cable, super, super strong, but very flexible. We use this multi-strand cable in two particular venues. One, on our high-speed wahoo lures, because we want that high-speed wahoo lure to have as much action in the water as it possibly can. So the multi-strand gives it that flexibility and gives it a lot of action. Two, for example, if you're targeting sharks, a lot of people like to shark fish, a multi-strand cable is a good option there as well. However, when it comes to chasing king mackerel, single strand wire seems to be the most popular. It is often sold, you can see up on the wall there, and they have a great price on them here, by the way, in coils, or you can buy pre-cut lengths, okay, in a variety of different strengths. This, too, is another area where I see so many guys overdoing it. By show of hands, somebody tell me, if you were out there chasing king mackerel, what pound test single strand wire are you fishing?
18. Number 4.
You're fishing 18-pound single strand wire for kings?
Number 4. 20-pound test line.
Hey, hold on, listen to what he's saying. So I'm only fishing 20-pound test line, and I'm fishing 18-pound single strand wire. His presentation is far stealthier than even mine. Okay, I'm fishing 40-pound. Okay, I used to fish years and years ago 80, and then I said, what the hell am I doing fishing 80? Then I went down to 60, then I went down to 50, now I'm down to 40. Tomorrow I'm going to fish 18, okay? Because he clearly, his presentation is much lighter and more natural. Now 18, I'm sure you'll admit, is a little bit on the light side, because it is easy to kink and break 18-pound single strand, and a 50-pound king or big smoker king can easily chop through that. Has it happened to you?
Never had a cutoff by a king.
By a king. How do you know? That you've only been cut off by wahoo.
No, I've only been cut off
By sharks. Okay. So again, point is, he's onto something because his presentation is very, very light and stealthy. And that's the point that I'm trying to make with this. I'm down to 40, and certainly I'm not afraid to go, even lighter. A lot of guys will fish that number 7 wire, number 8 single strand, way, way too heavy. You're restricting the movement of the bait. You don't need it. And I'll tell you what, they can see it. It's much more visible, certainly, than 18, and even much more visible than 40, okay? How do you connect, or how much wire do you fish? When we kite fish in the spring for these big king mackerel that often sky on the kite baits. And what I mean by that is you've got your kite spread set, you've got goggle eyes or even pilchards up on the surface, and out of nowhere, this beautiful king mackerel will just rocket right out of the water, and he'll sky on the bait. And I'll tell you what, sometimes it looks like they're 20 feet in the air. They're not, but certainly they'll clear 10 feet. They are coming up on that bait and literally grabbing it in their mouth, and oftentimes you can have a 4-foot length of wire and they'll still cut you off. They're not cutting the wire. They'll cut above the wire, okay? And on other occasions, you can have a short length of 10 inches and you won't get cut off. Every fish is different. So we found that balance to really be about 12 inches. I don't like to fish a tremendous length of wire. I feel like I'm either going to get them or I'm going to get cut off, and I'm not going to fish 4 feet of wire is just too much, in the hopes that I'm never going to get cut off, because you still will get cut off, okay? So you have to find that balance. So to us, that balance, again, is about a really 10 to 12 inch length of wire in between our fluorocarbon leader and the hook itself, and the live bait, obviously, that we're fishing. If we're fishing a stinger rig, then yes, we're of course going to have a piece of wire between the J hook and the treble hook. We have experimented 1,000 times between single strand wire and titanium. And here are the benefits and the pros and cons of each. Titanium, cost versus single strand, off the top of my head, I'm not sure, but I'd have to say 3 to 1 at least. Am I right? Marshall's going, more than that, Mike. Okay, so a lot more than that. It's substantially more expensive, the titanium, than the single strand wire. Number 2, with the titanium, you're not tying these tiny little knots, okay? Because you can't tie a knot in titanium. You can tie a knot, but it's a big, open, ugly looking knot that I would never trust in a million years. So the way that we connect titanium is we use very small crimps, really tiny crimps, and we take that titanium, we put it through a swivel or through the eye of the hook, we create a figure-8 pattern, we go back through the eye of the hook and then up to a tiny little crimp. And that crimp is so small that any crimping tool sold here is way too big for those tiny crimps. We go to the arts and crafts store right there on the corner of Sample and Federal, and we buy the little tiny crimps that they use to make bead necklace, and those are the crimps that we use, the tool to crimp these little tiny crimps. And if it's not done right, it will slip. If it's not done right, it will slip. If it is done right, it's strong, obviously, and it'll hold up. But if you're uncertain and if you don't have the proper size crimp to the proper size titanium and the right tool to do it, then I suggest you don't do it, because nothing is more frustrating than hooking a good quality fish and zing pow and losing that fish. Anybody ever lose a fish for any reason? Okay. So remember, again, one of the good sides is it's durable, and you can use this because it's flexible. You can use titanium leader material over and over and over. You can catch multiple kingfish on the same rig. Whereas with single strand, it tends to bend and kink and get all kind of knotted up. So, a lot of guys, this is almost like what I like to call disposable. You catch a fish or two on a rig with single strand wire, you're almost immediately going to another rig. That's why they sell these little tubes that contain, 300 pieces. This one little spool will probably last as long as this. One of the pros to the single strand is it's very easy to work with. You don't need the crimp. You don't need the little crimping tool. You just need to know how to tie a haywire twist, which is basically taking one end over the other and twisting it with your fingers. Okay, it's a little bit more to it than that, but that's basically what it requires. Anybody can do it, and it's a reliable little connection. So the single strand is more affordable, easier to work with, but nowhere near as durable as the titanium. It's not as strong as the titanium. Plus, the titanium is much more flexible, which allows your bait much more freedom in the water. So you've got two options there, depending on your skill level, depending on how deep your pockets are. Both will work, okay? Some of the tournament teams swear by titanium. We've done it both ways, and the truth of the matter is, I haven't seen more bites using the titanium than the single strand. You know, in other words, you're going to get just as many bites on the single strand as on the titanium. So while there's still, you know, a ton more to cover about monofilament and braid, and we can sit here forever, I think it's time for us to move on to the next element in the entire, you know, terminal tackle lineup, and that's swivels. Okay, because swivels play a big role because that's what you're using a lot of the times in a variety of different rigs. One of the most popular swivels is a ball bearing swivel, and obviously I've got one rated for about 1,100 pounds right here, just to make it easier for everybody to see. Basically 2 welded rings, okay, with ball bearings in the middle and a barrel that holds it all together. Now, I wanted to do a test one day, couple of years back, to really see if this swivel right here, and the package says that it's rated for 80 pounds. And I'm not sure if you can see that, but that swivel's about that big. It's tiny, tiny, tiny. And it says that that swivel's rated for 80-pound test. And I thought to myself, how in the world could that tiny swivel really be rated for 80 pounds? Which gave us an idea and said, let's test swivels. Let's test swivels from every company. Okay, Spro, Diamond, Croc. We went out and we got a ton of swivels, of barrel swivels, in a variety of different strengths, ranging from 50 pound all the way on up to 500 pound. And we created this little cable harness with 2 heavy snaps, one on each end, and we took all of these swivels and went to a line testing machine and tested 3 of each swivel and came up with an average, because we figured testing 1, who knows, maybe something went wrong, so we decided to test 3 across the board. And it literally took us 14 hours, because in between each swivel, we had to re-rig everything and document everything. And the truth of the matter is, when it was all said and done, I want you to all sleep well at night knowing that that rating is real. That rating is real. Okay, what that package says that that swivel is rated for is what that swivel will break at, if not above it. Only one company of all of them, and I'm not going to tell you who, consistently failed to break at that rating. But it was not one of the quality brands. So certainly you get what you pay for. I suggest that when it comes to swivels that you buy a quality product, and rest assured that it will break at that rating. And some of them broke, you know, ironically, evenly, where both rings popped out or straightened out, because this is a welded ring on this swivel. On some barrel swivels, it's not a welded ring. It's a split ring. Be very, very careful when you are purchasing your swivel that you read that package very carefully, because the same exact size swivel with a welded ring will be up to 5 times stronger than the same swivel with a split ring on both sides. That split ring will fail every time. So be very, very careful, okay? Also understand that today, swivels are smaller, lighter, and stronger than they've ever been before. Okay, back in the day, you know, 20, 30 years ago, we were using swivels this big for sailfish. Now we're using swivels this big, okay, that are absolutely, you know, we call micro swivels. They're so small, but yet they're so strong. The materials that they're using, the manufacturing processes that they're using, you know, have come such a long way. And obviously, again, this is an area where it's all about balance. If I'm fishing 50-pound braid and I've got a 80-pound fluorocarbon top shot, do I need an 1,100-pound swivel? No. Okay, on the flip side, if I'm fishing really heavy gear, obviously I can't go with a 20-pound swivel or a 50-pound swivel. So it's all about balance. Your entire system has to be balanced. But remember, if I'm fishing that outfit that we just talked about with, say, 50-pound monofilament line or even braided line, I don't need a swivel rated for 300-pound test. I'm not going to be putting that much pressure on my outfit, on the fish. Okay, I don't need a swivel that I can tow a truck with. So it's all about balance. Really, really important. Lots of different types of swivels out there. As I mentioned, the most common is a barrel swivel. You connect line to one end and you connect a leader or a lure or whatever it is to the other end. Pretty simple. The same exact swivel is available in a snap version where one side you're connecting your line to, and then there's a snap on the other side. And by the way, we also tested some snap swivels. The test was not about snap swivels, it was about barrel swivels. But I wanted to know if this swivel, this snap swivel, is rated for, hypothetically, 500 pound. Is it the snap that's rated for 500 pound, or is it the swivel up here that's rated for 500 pound? And what I learned by testing these snap swivels is you would think that this snap would pop open under too much pressure. That's what you would think. That's not what happens at all. When you apply too much pressure, this literally compresses straight down. And instead of this looking like this, it's about out to here, but it's still closed. Okay, it's still closed. That's not what fails. This does not pop open. Okay, it literally slides all the way down from the pressure and locks in. And of course, that's when you apply a tremendous amount of pressure. So it is in fact rated, or let me rephrase that, it will hold up to the rating on the package, regardless if it's a snap or a barrel swivel. So the most common barrel swivel, very often used to connect two lines together. Another swivel is called a heavy swivel. Looks like a hot dog. Okay, just looks like a little tube. Okay, it's really all it looks like. These heavy swivels are usually geared for a couple of different venues. One, they're often used as wind-on swivels because they're super strong for their size. So if you're fishing a heavy outfit, a heavy trolling outfit with large guides like the Bigfoot guides, you literally can take these heavy swivels and reel them right through the guides and onto the reel. Okay, that's what they were designed for. Or because they're so strong for a small size, again, it's more streamlined and you can use a smaller swivel in a heavier application when you're big game fishing. What I have found with these though is they tend to stick. Okay, the salt and the corrosion gets in there and they tend to not turn as smoothly as these barrel swivels. But both of these swivels are rated for the same strength, and you can see this one is substantially smaller than this one. So your signature, your terminal tackle profile is substantially smaller with these heavy swivels. And they make these all the way down to little micro size. Again, I'm not sure if you can see that, but this swivel is rated for 240 pound test. 240 pound test. What are you catching that you need this 240 pound swivel? Okay, so again, it's all about balance. Another option with swivels is what's called a three-way swivel. Probably the most, elementary swivel out there, so to speak. It's just this little three-way kind of thing with three eyes and you connect three lines to it. When would you use a three-way swivel? Hang on, go ahead.
Mutton snapper.
Mutton snapper fishing?
You run about a 75-foot leader off and then like a 2-foot leader down to your weight and then you drop it down.
Okay, so his answer when I asked when would you use a three-way swivel, he said when you're mutton snapper fishing, which is a good example. You would tie a very long leader to one side, may not be 75 foot, but a long leader to one side, and then off the other eye you can tie your bank sinker, okay, off the other eye, and then obviously off the third eye you could go right to your line. A lot of different ways to rig up for mutton snapper, certainly that is one of them. The advantage there is that you can take your sinker and that line connected to your sinker could be lighter than your leader and your main line. So if your sinker gets hung in the bottom, what's going to be the first thing that breaks? Your sinker. And you're still going to be able to get the rest of your rig back and potentially your fish back. This is also very popular on deep drop rigs. Most of the deep drop rigs you see will be rigged with three-way swivels where you'll have multiple hooks in line. Another option for that is what's called a sleeve swivel. Okay, and again, a little bit hard to see, but this is a tube. There's a little tube right on here, and on the tube is a barrel swivel. Okay, so essentially, it does something a little bit different than the three-way swivel. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hooks on here. There's a main trunk line right here, and then I can take these little sleeve swivels and slide them right down on the main trunk line. And I can position them wherever I would like on that main trunk line. As you can see, they don't move because you take a pair of crimpers and you crimp the end of each sleeve swivel. So it holds it in position right there, and it sticks straight out off the side where you can see I have my little branch line. Now keep in mind, this is a typical deep drop rig. We'll use this in the Gulf of Mexico, we'll use this in the Bahamas, we'll use this out here for golden tilefish, black belly rosefish, snowy grouper, queen snappers, 9/0 inline circle hook, 150-pound stiff leader material. That same leader material I talked to you about earlier because I want this rig to be relatively stiff. And again, those 5 sleeve swivels make it very easy. The advantage and disadvantage, I can rig this same rig with 3-way swivels. And instead of the sleeve swivel, I can have a 3-way swivel. The advantage to that is I can cut off. Like if you get cut off, you can easily retie your rig. This rig, if it gets cut right there, the rig's shot. It's useless, okay? But with the 3-way swivel, you can simply retie. So there are advantages to both. I like the sleeve swivel approach. I think I end up with a cleaner, more streamlined rig. But if you're looking for speed and efficiency, the 3-way is a little bit clumpier, but certainly that's an option as well. There's not a lot of uses for 3-ways, but I find that that's one of the most popular is certainly on the deep drop rigs. You know, when it comes to, not to get too far off the subject, but when it comes to mutton fishing or bottom fishing like you brought up, the disadvantage of a 3-way is when you have a lead coming off the bottom, it doesn't move. Kind of follow me? Doesn't move. My leader's coming off this side, my main line is coming off this side, and my sinker is coming off the bottom. A fish eats this bait, he still feels the restriction of the lead. So what we do is we will take, and I'll use this large barrel swivel just so it's easy to see. We'll take a barrel swivel like this, and we'll tie it to our main line. But before doing so, we'll slide another one right up on the main line. We'll slide the line through the eye of the barrel swivel. So essentially we have 2 barrel swivels. One is horizontal and one is vertical. Now a fish picks up the bait, this slides up the line and he doesn't feel any restriction from the weight. Okay, so we prefer to use this method over the 3-way swivels. Again, a lot of different options in the swivels. You know, when do you use a snap? When do you not use a snap? You know, here's another great example. When we're daytime sword fishing, when we connect our wind-on leader to our rig with the bait, we are not using snap swivels. We're never using a snap swivel. We are always crimping onto a heavy-duty ball-bearing barrel swivel, okay, not to a snap. Why? Because something as simple as this little point right there on that snap, that little point right there, could catch your leader, could catch your line. And when you're fishing in a venue that's as technical as daytime sword fishing in 1,800 feet of water, you don't want your leader catching on that little nookie right there, because it could spell disaster and your rig could tangle. So we don't use snaps in that sort of venue. On the other hand, when we're trolling, okay, we're often changing lures. You know, you're out there, you've got a trolling spread going on, you don't get a bite in 30 minutes, and suddenly you think every single lure in the spread stinks. And you're like, I gotta switch every lure. Anybody ever do that? Okay? So it becomes really easy to swap lures when you're fishing snap swivels, because all you gotta do is open up the snap, obviously pull the leader off, and put another leader on. So there's certainly a place for snaps, but we try and avoid them unless we absolutely need them. You know, one other area, for example, is kite fishing. We are fishing snaps off of our kite rigs because that leader itself, that 40-pound fluorocarbon leader, often gets chafed up, and it's much easier to just take another rig that's ready to go, especially if it's connected to wire leader, and just putting it right on the snap. So it's obviously important to have a combination of both, okay? And you know, I want to mention, get dialed in to what you're using. You don't need to have 50 different size snap swivels. You don't need to have 50 different size, you know, barrel swivels. When you're only using half a dozen of each, you know, depending on what you're doing. So get dialed in to what you're doing, what your venues are, what you're targeting, and how you're fishing, and master that, and get the correct gear and the quality equipment for what you're doing. Don't just buy stuff just to have it. Well, buy stuff just to have it here, okay? But other than here, don't just buy stuff just to have it, okay? So the next thing that's really important to talk about is obviously hooks. Okay, hooks, we use hooks that are that big. Can you see that? Can everybody see that? Okay, that's the smallest hook we will use, and that big. That's the largest hook that we will use. And by the way, a few people came up here and they're like, wow, look at that shark rig. Okay, that is not a shark rig. Okay, this is a Goliath grouper rig. This is what we use when we're targeting Goliath grouper. We're fishing 1,000-pound test monofilament, and that 1,000-pound test, and I know you're thinking, 1,000-pound test, how do you even put that on your reel? It's challenging, but that's what we fish, because when you're hooking these 300-400-pound Goliath grouper, it's not a game of give and take. It's a game of hold on for dear life, okay? So 1,000-pound, and then this is 1,000-pound multi-strand cable to a 16-0 circle hook. 16-0, you take this circle hook, you stick it in a big stingray. Goliath groupers love stingrays, okay? And that's how you fish for these Goliath grouper. You hook them in the corner of the mouth, you get them up next to the boat. After they almost rip you off the boat, you unhook them and you let them go. But point I'm making is hooks come in a, you know, wide range of sizes. And not only in a wide range of sizes, in a wide range of styles. Years ago, somebody came up with the idea of fishing circle hooks. Okay? What is a circle hook? And you know, just again, I'm just going to use this one just because for reference, it's easy to see. You can see this does not look like a typical hook. Okay? It doesn't look like your typical J hook. The point is coming in this way. When these were first introduced and I first looked at that, I'm like, I'm never fishing with that thing. What's that thing gonna catch? The point's not even sticking up. How in the world is that gonna work? Boy, was I mistaken. Okay, this is by far the most effective hook design ever created, is a circle hook. Okay, that's why all of the commercial fishermen use circle hooks on all of their long line gear. That's why we use circle hooks on our deep drop outfits that I just showed you. That's why we use circle hooks almost 90% of the time when we're fishing any sort of live bait or even dead baits, okay? They're extremely effective. However, there's a major difference between how a circle hook works versus how a J hook works. With J hooks, You get a bite, and it's like Saturday watching Bassmasters on TV, and they go, whoa, and they bend back, and they, swing that rod like crazy because they're trying to drive that hook into the fish's mouth. That's a J hook. With a circle hook, we don't do that at all. If you do that, you're going to pull a hook right out of the fish's mouth, and you're going to miss them altogether. In order for a circle hook to be effective, the fish picks up the bait, may it be a live bait or a dead bait. You point the rod tip right at the line, okay, and you allow the fish to swim away. And keep that rod pointed right at the line. Do not lift it up. Lock up the reel, wait for that line to come tight, and just start reeling. And what happens is that circle hook pulls out and grabs that fish right in the corner of the mouth 99.9% of the time. So if you are targeting fish that you're intending on releasing, is a circle hook not the right way to go? Absolutely. If you are targeting fish that you plan on harvesting and that you want to catch, is a circle hook not the right way to go? Absolutely. Okay. However, it depends on the application, because in order for that circle hook to be effective, as I mentioned, that fish has to turn, the hook has to catch him right in the corner of the mouth. So if you're trolling for wahoo, dolphin, any tuna, we don't use circle hooks on the troll because the fish is coming up from behind or from the side. He grabs the bait and he doesn't have that opportunity to turn and for that hook to catch him in the corner of the mouth. So when we're trolling, we're fishing J hooks. When we're fishing cut bait or live bait, a lot of the times, depending again on the venue, we will fish circle hooks. However, not all circle hooks are created equal. Okay, there are a lot of different designs in circle hooks for various purposes and various reasons. Anybody that's ever watched our show or knows me at all knows that one of my favorite, if not my favorite hook, is this VMC 90 inline tournament circle hook. Here's what's important about this hook. Number one is it's inline, as I just mentioned. What does that mean? You see this hook right there? I'm not sure if you can see it from that angle. Okay, but it's offset, it's crooked, bent, okay? Very effective at hooking that fish, very, very effective. However, it's also effective at hooking the fish right in the throat. So if you're targeting fish that you intend on releasing, for example, sailfish, it is a requirement in every sailfish tournament, because of course guys are releasing sailfish, that you fish inline circle hooks that are straight. They are not offset in any way whatsoever. In the Gulf of Mexico, when you are bottom fishing or fishing with live or cut bait, it is a requirement that you fish inline tournament circle hooks. Why? Because there's all these crazy regulations in the Gulf of Mexico, especially with red snapper, which they claim there are no red snapper in the Gulf of Mexico. Anybody go bottom fishing in the Gulf of Mexico lately? There are so many red snapper, you have to literally move the boat to get away from them, because all you're doing is catching these big red snapper and you're releasing them and watching them float away and birds and sharks eat them. But that makes sense. Anyhow, inline tournament circle hooks, like I said, very, very important in every sort of conservation fishery, okay? But they're also extremely effective, really, really effective. If you're not already fishing circle hooks, I can't stress enough, you're missing the boat. You're missing out. It requires less effort with a greater hookup ratio. What more do you want, okay? But remember, like I said earlier, they're not all the same. This is one of my favorite. There's another circle hook called a Nemesis. Same hook, okay, little bit, same hook, same size, but a thicker, stronger gauge, a heavier hook. Advantages, disadvantages. With these thinner wire hooks, easier to penetrate the fish's mouth. However, a heavier gauge hook inevitably is going to be a stronger hook. If I'm targeting amberjack out here on the wrecks, I'm not fishing this thin wire hook because they'll straighten it out. They literally will straighten this hook out. I'm going to turn to a Nemesis hook, a heavier gauge hook. Another option is what's called a Shure Set hook. Now, the Shure Set circle hook from VMC is the same gauge, essentially, as the tournament circle hook. The difference is this one is offset. Okay, it is offset. And again, you know, some people believe that the offset hook, you're gonna have an easier hookup ratio. I don't know, I think the inline is just as effective. What I have found with the offset hooks too, anybody ever have a hook that turns back and buries itself in the bait? You know what I'm saying? Either in a cut bait or a live bait. I find that those offset hooks will do that. The inline hooks will never do that. The inline hooks also, and really even the offset ones, in order for a circle hook to be as effective as it can be, the bait should be bridled, especially when you're fishing a live bait. Bridling a live bait requires connecting the hook to the bait with either a small rigging band or a piece of rigging floss to where the hook is fully exposed. Okay, you want that hook fully exposed in order for it to be effective. Circle hooks too, another thing that's important is something called the gape. That's this distance, the gape, okay? Some circle hooks, for example, this style, which you often see on deep drop rigs, is really, really heavy, but has a very small gape, okay? It'll hook those deep water groupers and snappers, and it's almost impossible for them to come off this hook. The bigger that distance, the wider that distance, the easier it is for that hook to come out of a fish. However, you're gonna find that with circle hook fishing, or when you're fishing circle hooks, you really don't lose a lot of fish. Not because of pulled hooks, okay? You don't pull hooks. Once you get them with that circle hook, I'll tell you what, 99% of the time, you got them. Something else is gonna go wrong before you pull that hook out of that fish. Then, of course, there are J hooks. You know, as we mentioned earlier, a hook that's shaped like a J, okay? I meant for that to happen, by the way, okay? However, these two are not all created equal. You have long shank hooks, you have short shank hooks. You know, obviously there are benefits to both. And even the same hook, you know, this is a Mustad, it's a long shank J hook. It's the same hook. It's exactly the same, but there's a huge difference in these two hooks. The eye. This eye is closed, this eye is open. Why would I need an open eye on a J hook? You can't answer every question. Why would I need an open eye on a J hook? For two hooks, that's exactly right. We fish double hooked ballyhoo, right? Okay, or sometimes we'll make a 3-hook sardine rig, so it's substantially easier to take these open eye hooks and put one hook in the other eye, and then with a pair of pliers, just close it. It's nearly impossible to do it with these hooks. So pay very close attention. There's probably a million different styles and sizes of hooks out there, and it could be a mystery, you know, as to what hook do I buy and when, and so on and so forth. Pay very close attention to the details, because the details make a very big difference. Another example, regular typical J hooks. This is a live bait 7/0 J hook, one of my go-to hooks. When I'm fishing a variety of live baits and cut baits, one of my favorite hooks. This is the same hook, but it's called a tuna tamer. Same size, but stronger. Heavier gauge and stronger, substantially stronger. So again, I don't need this super duper heavy duty hook if I'm targeting, for example, mutton snapper. Mutton snapper is a super strong fish, but it's no 100-pound yellowfin tuna, okay? You can get away with a typical, you know, live bait J hook. When you're targeting those really strong, powerful fish, you may want to go to a heavier gauge hook. And a lot of these companies, especially VMC, they make it easy. You want to go tuna fishing? Tuna tamer. There's no, you get me? You want to fish a live bait? Live bait hook. You want to fish a tournament? Tournament circle hook. I mean, it's right in front of you. It really is. And they do that because, you know, you want to hook more fish? Shure Set. Okay? They want you to buy their product, obviously, and they want you to be successful with their product. So they obviously make it as easy as possible. Just some of the other specialty hooks as well. You know, they make these inline single hooks where the eye, and I'll kind of pass this around because it's important for you to see this. You know, your typical lure, trolling lure, plug, a lot of variations of these, has treble hooks. Okay, what's the downside to treble hooks? That's right, it could be a nightmare, you know, it's dangerous to have all of these hooks. Plus, if you're in a hot bite, you don't want to have to sit there and deal with, you know, wedging all of these hooks out of a fish. So a lot of guys will switch these treble hooks to single hooks. This makes it very, very easy to do that with the configuration of the eye, so the hook doesn't track sideways, but it tracks vertically, okay, in the correct fashion, and it doesn't affect how that lure tracks or swims through the water. So go ahead and check those out. You'll see what I mean by the eye of the hook there, how different it is. So, you know, we've talked a lot about hooks. Let's also talk about the size of the hook. How do you determine what size hook you're going to fish? You know, what are the determining factors? The size of your bait. Okay, the size of your bait. Absolutely crucial. I do not want to take a pilchard, a little bait that weighs, you know, 1 ounce, and put them on this hook. I want to catch a big fish, so I want a big hook because I want to catch a big fish. But I can't take that tiny little bait and put, and I know that this is, you know, a big exaggeration, but I'm illustrating a point that you obviously want to decide or judge what size hook you're fishing based on the size of the bait, but that's only one of the calculations. It also obviously is the size of the fish, because I don't want to take this tiny little #1 hook that I would fish maybe a peeled shrimp for yellowtail when they become really, really finicky. You take a shrimp, this has nothing to do with the seminar, I'm just telling you this. You take a shrimp, cut the head off, peel the body off so you just have the meat on the tail. And you take that meat and you put it on a small #1 circle hook, just like this, with 10-pound fluorocarbon leader. Okay, and you feed that out behind the boat to the yellowtails. And the yellowtail that weren't biting, now we're gonna bite. Okay, it is super, super stealthy. But point I'm making, again, you're not gonna take a tiny little hook like this and go after dolphin, because obviously it's not going to be balanced, and a dolphin will straighten that hook, just like I just did with my fingers. Actually, I couldn't. Well, I did a little bit. Damn, I'm strong. Okay, so there, it'll bend it, just like that. So you have to find that balance, again, to what makes sense. Okay, so decide on what is the size fish that I'm targeting, and what is the smallest, stealthiest, lightest hook that I can get away with without jeopardizing losing a quality fish. Because we all know, and I've said this in every seminar and I'll say it again, one big quality fish can change the outcome of any day out on the water. Any day. Any day. A 50-pound wahoo, I'll take that all day long. And I'll be happy. I'll come home with a 50-pound wahoo. How about you guys? Okay? I'll be more than happy to come home with one 300-pound swordfish. You know what? We just filmed the swordfish show, fished for 2 days. I'd be happy to come home with a 50-pound swordfish. Okay? Fortunately, we caught 3, but there have been days where, you know, one fish can really make a huge, huge difference. So you don't want to jeopardize losing that fish because you're undergunned. Okay, but at the same token, you don't want a fish tackle that's too heavy. So like with everything else, it's a balance, okay? It's a balance that you have to get dialed into. One other hook style that I want to mention as well, and then we'll move on to the next subject here and start to wrap this up. This is an Octopus style hook. It's a very, very popular hook. It's a J hook. It's offset. A lot of guys, this has been one of my mutton snapper hooks, one of my favorites for years, okay? Again, the only disadvantage of this hook is because it is offset, sometimes it'll turn back around and embed itself in the bait, especially if it's a live bait. If it's a dead bait, I don't find that at all. I don't find that problem at all. But if it's a live bait, it'll sometimes embed itself in the bait. So just be careful about that with the offset hooks, okay? There are, if you go back there, there's a rack. There's probably more than one rack, but there's, you know, certainly a rack back there, or another one over there, that literally has dozens and dozens and dozens of styles and sizes of hooks. And again, there's a hook for, there's not one hook for every application. There's 100 hooks for every application. So you really have to get dialed in as to what it is that you're doing, how you're fishing, you know, and what's important to you. And when all else fails, you certainly can purchase pre-made rigs. I'm not a guy that purchases pre-made rigs. I don't like to purchase pre-made rigs. Do they work? Sure. You know, and if you're not sure as to what hook I should use if I'm targeting flounder in the Indian River, buy a flounder rig. And at the very least, it's a place for you to start. However, I find that pre-made rigs, they don't take the same consideration into stealth as we do. They don't take the same consideration sometimes into quality as we do. Because if they use the best hook and the best fluorocarbon leader and the best swivel, they have to sell you that pre-made rig at 3 times the price that they're selling it to you for. So again, there's that whole fine line as to what makes more sense. I like to tie all of my own rigs from beginning to end, no matter what it is that we're doing. However, I've got the tools, I've got the crimps, I've got the swivels, I've got the leader material. I practically have a tackle shop that looks like this in my garage. Well, maybe not like this, but close. Okay, if you don't have all of that, then you know you have to decide what makes the most sense for you. And again, if you're just getting started, if you're a novice and you're not sure, either purchase the pre-made rigs or ask. Ask the guys at the counter. You know, there's a lot of tackle shops where you walk in and you feel like you've got 3 heads, like nobody will talk to you or whatever it is. You know, you just don't feel comfortable there. Okay, you really don't. Chaos is not one of them, and I'm not throwing these guys a bone. That's not what this is about. This is about walking in the front door at a tackle shop and feeling comfortable, like you mean something regardless of your skill level, and not being afraid to walk up to the guy and saying, hey, you know, I'm going to the pier to go pompano fishing, or I'm going offshore and I want to catch groupers and snappers, or whatever it is that you want to do. Can you point me in the right direction? Can you help me out here a little bit? It's the fool that doesn't ask the question, because nothing is, you're putting in all this time and energy and effort to go out there. Do it right. At least do it right. Okay, and if you're not sure how to do it right, ask somebody who does know how to do it right. And if they don't answer, you call me and I'll tell you how to do it. Okay, our office is right there on Sample. Come in anytime and I'll walk you right over here and we'll get you the right stuff. Okay, another thing, organization. I'm huge on organization. Okay, when it comes to terminal tackle, you've got to be organized. And what I have found, the easiest thing to do is I have boxes and containers for each style of fishing. So for example, this is my kite box. All of my everything. I've got sinkers, rigging bands, swivels, hooks, but I don't have hooks for yellowtail snapper in my kite box. I don't have swordfish hooks in my kite box. I have sailfish hooks and dolphin hooks, the hooks that I'm going to fish when I'm kite fishing. So everything I need, even extra kite clips, balloons, rigging needle and thread, everything is right here. And I understand you're not going to suddenly have a tackle box for every application. And neither did I. It took years to build these boxes. You know, it took years to get fine-tuned as to what was important to me. Swordfish box, swordfish hooks, you know, the right crimps, the right barrel swivels, the you know, rigging needles, the crimping tool. Like I said, it's going to take you years to put it all together, but do it the right way. You know, because you're going to be a more successful angler, and that's what this is all about. It's about the fundamentals. That's what this seminar is about. You know, and if you skip on any of those little areas, you're going to lose out there. Okay, this is not Costa Rica. And I say Costa Rica because I was recently in Costa Rica. Oh my God, do you know how many fish are in Costa Rica? And those fish are stupid. Okay, those fish will eat anything. The blue marlin come up behind the boat. They're like, hi, kill me. Okay, I mean, it's ridiculous. But it's a different world. It really is a different world than South Florida. We have more people live here. There's more people fishing here. The pressure here is absolutely unbelievable. I talked to a couple guys here just a little bit earlier who were out, I can't remember if they said today or yesterday, but found very challenging. They didn't catch much, you know, it was challenging out there. It just, that's, you know, that's what we're facing, you know, but there's still exceptional fishing to be had out here. Are you gonna go out and crush them every single day? Nope, okay? I don't care who you are, you know. I recently, and I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but I can't help myself for sharing this. I recently got an email from somebody, and I should have brought it to read to you verbatim. But in a nutshell, it said, "Hey, Captain Mike, I hate you. I hate you. I hate your boat. How do you think that we have $250,000, and I'm quoting this guy, to go out and buy a boat?" And I'm like, well, my boat's 400,000 pounds. I don't know about 250, but anyhows, and thousands of dollars in tackle, and and forget the overpriced fishing apparel, okay? And he kept going on and on and on about how do we dare go out there and fish this equipment and fish this boat and think that everybody can just snap their fingers and go out there and do it. My answer to him, and he said, you know what? I stopped recording your shows. I canceled, the magazine. I'm sure your TV show and your magazine will go on, but not with me, period. And we all laughed about it. Okay, that was you that said that? Okay. So we all kind of laughed about it a little bit, and I still do. So I wrote the guy back, and I said, his name's Mark. I said, Mark, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm going to address your concern in the next issue of the magazine. Make sure your subscription's up to speed. He hasn't answered me yet. But the point I'm making is even with the best equipment, you can have the best equipment, the best boat, the best tackle, a lifetime of experience on the water. You can go out there and still catch nothing, okay? And catch what we call the donut, okay? The skunk, the dreaded skunk. Anybody ever go out and not catch anything? Is there anyone not raising their hands? Okay? It happens to all of us. We can't control the fish. We can't control the weather. But all of the other things that we can control, we're going to control. Okay? We're going to eliminate angler failure. Anybody ever lose a fish because they made a mistake? You took a gaff and you beat the crap out of a dolphin on the head instead of sticking the hook in it, right? And then the fish goes, doo, and swims away. That's angler failure. Okay? Or you're trying to flip a fish that's too big. Tackle failure. You lose a fish because your drag was set wrong. Anybody ever lose a fish because of a bad knot? Come on. Come on. We all have, okay? It's part of the whole fishing and learning thing, okay? That's tackle failure. If you eliminate angler failure and if you eliminate tackle failure from the equation, you will be a much more successful angler in every venue, okay? One other thing, while we're just kind of finishing up on the subject of hooks, I wanted to share something with you, which kind of has a little to do with the seminar, but I want to show you something on how far hook design and the logic behind hook design has come and is continuing to evolve, okay? So one of the things that I've really been getting into a lot lately is called slow pitch jigging. And what slow pitch jigging is, it allows us to fish really heavy lures with incredibly light tackle in ultra deep water with very specialized tackle, very specialized reels, very specialized line, leader, rods. Everything is super, super specialized, and including the jigs. So as an example, this is a particular slow pitch jig. Again, right from Japan. You cannot get this anywhere here in the US. It was invented in Japan because their fisheries are so pressured, so much more than ours, that they had to come up with ways to catch fish in deeper water. They're jigging giant groupers in 2,000 feet of water off the bottom, okay? Not on top, off the bottom, 2,000 feet of water. Think about that, it's incredible. So a lot of that is slowly making its way here. This is one of many different style jigs. You can see it's got a little bit of glow, it's got some incredible finish to it, but what's important when you flip the jig around, that's more glow patterns, and what you can or cannot see are these little ledges, these little kind of indentations. This jig weighs 420 grams. That is somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 ounces. So it weighs a pound. But because of those little cuts right there, when you are jigging and uplifting, the jig feels like it weighs 1 ounce, not 1 pound. It is incredibly light. However, what I wanted to point out is the hooks. If you can see on the bottom, there are two hooks. These are called assist hooks. There are two on the bottom that face each other. And maybe that's easier to see like that, okay? And then there are two on top that face each other. So there are 4 hooks on every lure. So when I first saw that, I thought to myself, why in the world would I have to fish a lure with 4 hooks? When traditionally I've been jigging with diamond jigs my whole life for a variety of species with 1 hook and caught a ton of fish. So why suddenly now do I have to fish with 4 hooks? So these geniuses in Japan who came up with this logic realized that the signature of the hook, hooks make noise in the water. They're unnatural, they make noise, and when I say noise, obviously not quite like that, but every time that hook moves through the water, it creates a sound. So to create the most stealthy, most natural approach, they realized that they needed hooks that are super, super thin and very, they're ridiculously sharp like a razor, but they're very, very thin. And because they're very thin and very lightweight, they're almost like aluminum, okay? I think they are aluminum. They're also weak. They're very weak. So if you had 1 hook on this 16-ounce jig and you drop this down to the bottom and hooked a 50-pound grouper with 1 hook, what's gonna happen? You're gonna straighten that hook because all of that pressure is on that one particular point. Well, what happens with these hooks is literally you get all 4 hooks in the fish. So now the pressure is dispersed to 4 different points instead of 1 point. And 95% of the fish that you catch will have 1 or 2 hooks in the mouth and 1 or 2 hooks buried in either the side of their face, on top of their head. This is not about catch and release fishing. This is about catch and kill fishing. But it enables you to fish incredibly light tackle. Now again, the point I'm trying to illustrate is not only do they create these ultra thin hooks, which don't even have an eye. There's not even an eye on the hook. But this length from the lure to the hook comes in a variety of different sizes, lengths, and strengths. So you can even reduce your terminal tackle signature even further. And you can say, well, instead of fishing 275-pound Dacron, I can bring this down to 125-pound, which makes this thinner and the hooks smaller and the lure quieter. Again, slightly complicated. You're going to learn a lot more about it. We've written a lot about slow pitch jigging in our magazine, and you're going to see it on our TV show in the future. And as far as I'm concerned, this is the wave of the future. It will revolutionize fishing the way that you know it. What we've been able to accomplish with these jigs in a variety of venues just continues to astound me. Okay, the variety, right now I think I'm up to 42 different species out here in our waters on slow pitch jigs. Everything that eats a live bait will eat a slow pitch jig. And what doesn't eat live bait?